So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that I'm a guest here on Treaty 1 land, and I grew up on Treaty 4 land in southern Saskatchewan. So it's an honor to be here, and all the presentations this morning were amazing. So my MDP field placement was in southern Saskatchewan where I grew up. So one of the things I was thinking of when I was considering my field placement was I really wanted to go home and contribute and try to give back to where I grew up, because there's a need for development, Indigenous development, and so I feel responsibility. I felt a responsibility, especially with the knowledge that I've gained. So I'm going into my second year, and so I was kind of like on home territory. Two communities that I'm familiar with, Piepot First Nation, Ochapawais Cree Nation. Actually, I had an elder who's not with us anymore, but he's from Piepot First Nation. So it was really an honor and privilege to be in Treaty 4 land and for my field placement. So my field placement was economic development and health funding arrangement. So the economic development portion was with Piepot First Nation, and the health funding arrangement was with Ochapawais, and I'm still working on that. So just an overview about Piepot, talk about the land resource and the economic development opportunities, and then a little bit about Ochapawais and the health funding arrangement and the work that I'm doing with both. So just a little bit about Piepot. So it's in Treaty 4 land in the Qu'Appelle Valley. So the Qu'Appelle Valley is a really big stretch of land. Actually, both communities are in the Qu'Appelle Valley that I worked with, but they're about 200 kilometers, almost 200 kilometers away from each other. So Piepot's 30 kilometers north of Saskatchewan provincial capital, Regina, and it's a member of the File Hills Qu'Appelle Tribal Council, which I think encompasses 10 First Nations, if I'm not, somewhere around 10. And so they're mostly in the Qu'Appelle Valley, so there's like a dense concentration of First Nations. The registered population of Piepot's 2280, with only 590 living on reserve, and there's many of the registered population in Regina because of the close proximity and other major centers around Western Canada. And the close proximity to the urban center of Regina provides ready access to essential and non-essential services to band members in the community. So it really benefits from being close to an urban center. It really, it allows for a lot for the community and close proximity to everything. So just a little bit of an overview of the land resources. Piepots really benefit from having a lot of land resources. So through the treaty land entitlement, through the province of Saskatchewan, Piepot's details are shortfall acres of almost 40,000 acres, with a maximum acreage of just over 81,000 acres. Piepot has added another 51,000 acres to reserve since 1992. So my apologies, the TLE I think is the federal, and the additions to reserve is the provincial. So I just want to correct myself. Since 1992, with another 6,000 acres in the additions to reserve process through the province of Saskatchewan. So Piepot also negotiated a specific land claim agreement, which added an additional 17,500 acres to the settlement. To date, there has been 1,750 acres converted to status land in specific claim acres. And that's Piepot's flag. They have their own flag too, so I love showing that. So just a little bit about my field placement. My mentor at Piepot was Chief Jeremy Fourhorns. And we sat down in February when I went home for reading break, and we really decided my interest was in economic development. And so we decided that's where the bulk of my work was going to be, even though I'm kind of interested in everything, but Chief Fourhorns really had a focus on economic development. And so that's where we decided that my work with Piepot would be. So actually in March, Chief Fourhorns was here, and he asked me to do a presentation, to prepare a presentation for him, basically about the urban reserve that Piepot has, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So it really gave me some good background, and we also took an Indigenous economic development course, and I decided to focus on Piepot because I knew I'd be working there. So it really, through the presentation, through the course, it gave me a good opportunity to learn more and realize all the potential that Piepot has, specifically with land. As I've mentioned, they've tapped in just to a little bit of that. So initial work was doing the presentation, and then the work shifted to analyzing plans for development on Piapot's urban reserve in the city of Regina in a prime commercial location. So that's a picture, and in red is Piapot's land base, and that's basically the home land base, so where the band office is and where the bulk of the community resides, pretty much all the community resides. So you can see there's like the creek running through it, so that's a Capel Valley. So Piapot's really beautifully situated just on the lip, and you kind of when you're driving into the band office, you can see the whole Capel Valley. It's prime location. It's actually where Regina should be in that location, because Regina is just in a crap location. It should actually be in the Capel Valley. So Piapot really is, they have awesome land. It's really beautiful. So, like I said, the bulk of my work was, for Piapot, was looking at the urban land development opportunity. So working with the community. So I did a project in our Indigenous Economic Development course on what I thought would be a good idea for the community. And then when I got to exploring what Piapot was looking at, I saw that they were looking at kind of the same idea as well. So there's 0.6 hectares of registered urban land in Regina in prime commercial location. There's a map on the next page, and on the next slide. And right now they have a little convenience store and a gas bar there. And so that comprises 4 of the adjacent lots. So the other 6 lots are basically available for development. So that's what my work was exploring that. So there's basically the location land. It probably doesn't mean anything to you if you're not from Regina, or if you haven't been there, but Albert Street, so basically on the right, that's the main drag. That's like Portage in Regina. So it's right beside, the busiest street in Regina. So it's really, they have available to them an amazing piece of land. So we're 1 block over, and the gas bar is on the north part of the property there, and then on the south part of the property, the 6 lots, that's the opportunity for development. So some of the business ideas that Piapot Chief and Council and community members want to explore were a lounge and VLT terminal facility, pharmacy, a grocery store, which is what I had chosen for my project in the community, or the Indigenous Economic Development course we took, an office building space. So basically, the lounge and VLT, there's a lot of barriers to introducing. So when you decide to bring in VLTs into a business, you can only introduce them slowly. So the short-term feasibility of that just wasn't there, because over time, as your business duration progresses, that's when you can start to introduce more VLTs. So you can't just bring in 20 VLTs off the bat. I think you have to start out with like 4, and so basically it wasn't feasible from a strictly economic standpoint for the VLT facility. With the pharmacy as well, so the margin for profits on pharmaceuticals or medications or whatever is really small. So the pharmacy in itself wasn't feasible on its own, but the business could be feasible along with another business idea. So, that complicates matters. You can't just have a pharmacy and expect it to be feasible. That's what the business plans I looked over had mentioned. And so the grocery store, which I was really passionate about, because the urban reserve land is, it's in the north central part of Regina, so it's kind of an up-and-coming community, and there is no grocery store in the vicinity. So I thought from an economic standpoint and also a social standpoint, like having something like Inichi Foods there would be amazing. And then finally, the office building space. So Piapot had decided building office space in the urban reserve is a plan for economic development the community stands behind. So Chief Warhorns really stretched that. There was kind of a consensus about building the office space. So one of the goals, because the leasing market right now in Regina is extremely soft, especially for kind of medium to low end business office spaces, it wasn't feasible. The amount of rent that you could charge per square footage just wasn't feasible to do. So they had to really focus on finding Indigenous organizations. And there's challenges with that because many Indigenous organizations receive federal funding, and that federal funding is only like in a year or 2-year basis. So from a long-term feasibility point of view, it was there was really a lot of challenges with that, and that's kind of where work on the field placement with Pie Pot started, or stopped, because we kind of hit a wall there, and we ran out of time, alas. Oh, where did that come from? Oh, weird. So about Ochapowace First Nation, I'm running out of time, but Treaty 4 community, and as you can see, it's a young community. A third of the community lives on reserve. It's located 8 kilometers north of Broadview, Saskatchewan, in between Regina and Winnipeg, a little closer to Regina. There's on the map where Ochapowace Cree Nation is situated. I'm getting a stop sign, so I'm just going to continue just because I can't leave you guys hanging. But so basically, Ochapowace wanted me to explore their health funding arrangement with First Nations and Inuit Health Branch for delivering health programming on reserve. I actually worked for First Nations and Inuit Health Branch for 6 years, so I had a bit of the background to be able to do the work, and I'm still doing the work right now. So there's 3 main funding models. I won't get into them too much, but basically the block funding model is where Ochapowace is moving, and that allows the community the most freedom and autonomy as far as controlling their health funds and where they go as far as programming is concerned. And that allows them to place the most funding into the programs that they feel, that they determine to be the most important for the community. So it's really a great place to be. So I'm using their existing community health plan. I'm going to tweak it, modify it, working with Health Canada, working with my mentor at Ochapowace Cree Nation, Audrey Isaac. And so we're going to get Ochapowace set up with a multi-year work plan that they can use for their block funding arrangement. Is there any questions? Question. Ignore the S.
So you said something that a number of the presenters this morning have said, which is to talk about the need for flexibility. And I was interested in your presentation about really thinking the food store was the way to go, or the grocery store, and the First Nation you were working with thinking the office space was better. So I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that. What made you shift to their priority? What were the problems with that for you? And do you want to talk about that more generally?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because something I kind of want to address too, as far as like one of the challenges in managing expectations. I think one thing I've really learned, I've really been blessed. I think we've all been blessed in the MDP with great professors, and one thing that's really been driven home is that development isn't about me, and it isn't about my projections or people who are practicing development's projections. And I think, you know, my personal opinion is a lot of development has been extension of colonialism, because we've been imposing our ideas onto communities. So it was just, you know, I was really like, I feel like I was in a really good mind frame to approach my field placement, because, you know, it didn't matter what I thought. And really, you know, when I figured out or found out from Chief Fourhorns that the communities really, as a consensus, stood behind this, and we had a bit of dialogue about that, I just knew that that was the only, you know, place that I was going to spend my time exploring. So, you know, there really wasn't too much of a conflict there. You know, like, I still think the grocery store is a great idea. And I think that the shortcomings of the business plans I looked at that were done for the community were really strictly looking at the economic feasibility rather than looking at the sociocultural benefit of having kind of a niche foods model for Pie Pot on their urban reserve. So, you know, I still stand behind thinking that's a good idea, but again, it's not about me. You know, I can have all my ideas, I can do my academic research, you know, exploring different models for economic development, but it really is what the community wants to do, and that gives them empowerment. So, you know, my future work in development is just going to be, you know, batting for the community wherever I work. So, but it was a good lesson. It was good to kind of think about that when I was doing my work. So, yeah, thanks.
During brainstorming for ideas for this property, did manufacturing ever come up?
No, it didn't. Yeah, it didn't. That's a good idea. I you know, I really want to keep in touch because I have a relationship with Pie Pot. I hope to keep up, you know, and keep in the know of what they're doing, and, you know, hopefully present some more ideas and have that spread. But you know, they're a really intelligent community. They know, and I think they, you know, they have their own processes for getting consensus and stuff like that, and I respect that. So, but yeah, it's really exciting. I think they're in a really exciting place. So it's exciting for me to see that. But that's a good idea that I never heard or.
Thank you very much, Deb.